Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
Hillary Clinton wants to abolish it, believe me. She wants to abolish our Second Amendment.
I think they didn't deny it. I don't think anybody denied it.
Other presidents did not call. They'd write letters, and some presidents didn't do anything.
Many people have come out and said I'm right.
You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Hello and welcome to Fallacious Trump, the podcast where we use the insane ramblings of a knife-wielding goose on the subway to explain logical fallacies. I'm your host, Jim.
And I'm your other host, Mark. A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that results in bad or invalid arguments. And the logical fallacy we're taking another look at this week is the Galileo Fallacy. Nice. I see the knife-wielding goose on the subway made another appearance.
Yeah. See, I thought I'd made that up off the top of my head as an example
I thought you had.
Of a dangerous, unpredictable thing in an enclosed space.
Yeah.
Turns out, because one of our favourite listeners, Renee Z, looked it up because she said, I don't get these references, I'm old, so I looked it up and that's a funny meme. And I was like, what? With the meme? I didn't.
Oh, it's an actual thing?
Apparently, because, there was a few years ago, there was a thing called the Untitled Goose Game.
Right.
Where you play a goose.
Yeah.
And there's a bit in there where you can pick up a knife, and there's apparently that was a thing that went round was memes of the knife wielding goose. So apparently that exists, and it was
okay.
But I thought I'd made it up completely.
Oh, right. You don't think it kind of
I don't think it
somehow percolated
into
its
my
way.
subconscious.
Yeah.
But who knows?
But it's the kind of thing that we would say and we would be attracted to. Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, there you are.
There you go.
Yeah. And he is. Yeah.
The Galileo Fallacy.
Yeah.
We did talk about this back in episode 9 originally.
Wow.
And we're taking another look at it. This is where someone equates themselves to someone like Galileo, who in the past was a maverick or someone who went against the mainstream and was ridiculed for it and then later turned out to be correct.
Right.
And in doing so, people who are demonstrably wrong in their thinking believe themselves to be simply misunderstood geniuses like Galileo.
Right. Right. And also that the strength of the opposition that Galileo experienced and that they are experiencing somehow justifies the ultimate rightness.
Yeah, that's somehow evidence
position.
That they're going to turn out to be the ones who are right.
Who are Galilean. Yeah, I wonder how often that's true.
Yeah, less often than you'd think.
Yeah.
So our first example from Trump actually comes from a lawsuit where he sued Twitter.
Right.
Back when his account was suspended after January 6th.
Right.
Which Twitter said at the time was because he basically had incited violence. And he claimed was because they didn't like the things he was saying about the election being rigged and all of that kind of stuff, and that they were suppressing his free speech, and that they were doing so as an arm of the government. Remember, he was currently president at the time, but because various members of Congress had said, oh, that's bad, we don't think he should be allowed to say that kind of thing, and later Twitter suspended his account, he was like, oh, this is the government suppressing my speech somehow.
Right.
So he sued them.
And of course.
It was thrown out because, of course.
And
he appealed. And this was part of the case that went to the appeals court. And it's a little bit of a lengthy bit of text, but I think it's all important. This is from the introduction to the lawsuit. It says, this case presents the most important free speech issue of our day. Can government officials use the power of their office to suppress speech they disagree with by threatening, demanding and colluding with social media platforms to remove ideas from the public square? Because they know that the government itself may not engage in such viewpoint discrimination, these officials accomplish by indirection what the Constitution precludes them from doing directly. They use social media platforms as cat's paws to suppress opinions and information about matters that Americans consider of vital interest, including those that turn out to be correct or at least debatable, such as that the Hunter Biden laptop was authentic, the COVID virus leaked from a laboratory, COVID vaccines provide weak protection that does not outweigh the risk of vaccine injury, and the 2020 election was stolen. Most people once believed these to be crackpot ideas. Many still do. But crackpot ideas sometimes turn out to be true. The Earth does revolve around the sun, and it was Hunter Biden, not Russian disinformation agents, who dropped off a laptop full of incriminating evidence at a repair shop in Delaware. Galileo spent his remaining days under house arrest for spreading heretical ideas, and thousands of dissidents today are arrested or killed by despotic governments eager to suppress ideas they disapprove of. But this is not the American way. We believe the path to truth is forged by exposing all ideas to opposition, debate, and discussion.
Wow. So his ideas that he had expressed were exposed to opposition. And they went, yeah, you can't say that. Yeah. We're not going to let you say that.
I mean, apart from the fact that that wasn't why his account was suspended.
Yeah.
Because he'd been saying the election was rigged from well before the election.
Yeah.
And like multiple times a day after the election. And so did many, many other people whose accounts weren't suspended. But yeah, those things that he mentioned that turned out to be correct, most of them did not turn out to be correct in any way.
No. Other than the Earth does revolve around the sun.
Yeah.
But actually making that leap from there to Hunter Biden dropped off the laptop.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, he's just like Galileo. He later, in this, his lawyer in this, later compared him to Einstein.
Wow.
Pointing out how E=mc² was initially disapproved of by scientists at the time. Like lots of people came out and said, well, that's bullshit. And turns out he's right. So there you go. Just like Einstein. Trump will be proved correct in time. Yeah,
but only if he then controls the narrative by becoming president again, and then pardons all the people that were arrested at the January the 6th stuff.
Which still so thereby prove him right.
No, but he wouldn't put it past him to point at that and say, look, they're all innocent. They were pardoned. Yeah, you pardoned them.
Yeah.
Wow.
This lawsuit, the appeal was thrown out, was dismissed in 2025 eventually.
Good grief.
Partly because his account had already been restored by that point by Twitter after Elon Musk took over. So there was really no remedy left.
Yeah.
Even if they had agreed with him, which they didn't.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, Elon Musk took it over, got rid of all the fact checkers. So all of those people whose accounts were suspended because their facts were checked, got restored. Yeah. Wow.
So our second example is from Karoline Leavitt. This is a tweet defending RFK Jr. after the whole Tylenol autism debacle.
Right.
She said, Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. is taking flack because he's over the target. The Trump administration is addressing root causes of chronic disease, embracing transparency in government, and championing gold standard science. Only the Democrats could attack that common sense effort. Yeah. This idea of taking flack when you're over the target is basically this fallacy, because it is saying that the only reason that people are saying negative things about what you're saying is because it's true.
Yeah.
If it wasn't true, they wouldn't be saying negative things.
Yeah.
Which is bullshit, because you say negative things about people who aren't saying the truth. If people are giving misinformation, people will say, that guy's lying.
Weirdly. Yes, that isn't evidence of their truth. Yes, the fact that thousands and thousands of people are saying, no, you're absolutely wrong, doesn't mean you're right.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's also a bit of a straw man going on in there, no? With with kind of putting that middle paragraph where the Trump administration is addressing root causes of chronic disease and blah, 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 blah. Only the Democrats will attack that. Who's attacking this stuff? That's a fallacy inside a fallacy there.
There's a paragraph of lies in the middle. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, if he was addressing root causes of chronic disease, embracing transparency and championing gold standard science, no one would have a problem with that.
Exactly, yes.
That's what they wish he was doing.
Yeah.
So lying that he's doing that and then saying Democrats are attacking this,
I'll go along with that. That's or the Democrats saying he's not doing that. She's saying, well, you're attacking it. No. So the fact that lots of the Democrats are saying you're not doing that doesn't mean he is. It doesn't mean, that it is a common sense effort if you were doing it. Or, just stating that, that seems like a good thing to do. Yeah.
So our final example in this section is from Rick Perry from a Republican debate in 2011. When he was asked about his views on climate change.
The idea that we would put Americans' economy at jeopardy based on scientific theory that's not settled yet to me is nonsense. I mean, and I tell somebody, I said, just because you have a group of scientists that have stood up and said, here is the fact, Galileo got outvoted for a spell.
Yeah, because some scientists tell you that the world is warming and it's your fault.
Yeah. You know, you can't. That doesn't make it a fact just because they are light on a particular fact. Yeah, that's the problem. You can prove anything with facts. Yeah, man.
But this is about championing essentially being in the minority, because when the majority, well, not just the majority of people, but the majority of experts in a field is against you.
Yeah.
The desperate man clings to the Galileo gambit.
Clings to Galileo's ankles. Yeah, the hem of his toga. Yeah. Did he wear a toga?
I don't know.
He wasn't a Roman. Yeah. He was Italian, but he wasn't a Roman. Yeah.
And now is the time, I think, for Mark's British politics corner.
In 2015, UKIP's Nigel Farage, remember UKIP? He misquoted Gandhi in a Galilean way, saying, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Which for me seems to sum it up nicely. So he's kind of the underlying thing under there is, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. I am right. So first they ignore you, then they'll laugh, then they'll fight you, and then you win. And horrifyingly, 11 years on, kind of that. We've gone past the laughing bit, and I think
we've gone past the fighting bit to some extent.
Yeah, and yes, exactly.
Elections coming up next week.
Yeah,
next couple of weeks.
Yeah, let's hope. And I did notice him on the TV as a complete aside. Somebody was saying to him, "Okay, so your stance on the NHS?" Said yes. You said that you didn't want it funded by the taxpayer. He said, no, I never said that. And then she just went, here's you saying it, and played him the clip. But he said, no, I never said that. It's taken out of context. So you think, So hopefully we've gone back to laughing at him. Going to go back to that bit. Let's go back.
I don't think we'll ever stop laughing at him.
Oh, no, that's true. But let's just hope at some point we'll get the message and start ignoring him again. Yeah. So, and then here's Jonathan Dimbleby, who's a part of the BBC alumni, kind of one of the dynasties of journalists on the BBC. The Dimbleby, as it were, yeah. And he, on LBC Radio in November 2025, said this.
If you've got a combination of Netanyahu, Putin, and Trump denouncing the BBC, there must be something quite good about it.
Which is a kind of an echo of something that one particular Director General, possibly Greg Dyke, said, if not Lord Reith, if we're pissing off both sides of, I don't think Lord Reith was, I said, pissing off, if we're pissing off both sides of the political sphere, then we must be doing something right. So there's that whole justification of, which is, it's difficult to call this a fallacy when you're lining up Netanyahu, Trump, and Putin. If they're complaining, then you must be doing something right. That's quite cool. So, given that doesn't help the BBC's left-wing bias accusations, but reflecting on the rise of the right and the criticism of the rise of the right, journalist Mick Hume, you possibly use the word advisedly, was writing in the European Conservative in June 2025, said, looking at the ever longer list of issues and opinions now branded far right, it seems safe to draw one conclusion. If they try to smear you as far right today, it's a sure sign that you must be doing something right. Which, which leads us quite nicely on to Zia Yusuf, who's the deputy leader of the far-right UKIP/Brexit Party Reboot limited company owned by Nigel Farage, the Reform Party UK, he espouses some of those far-right policies and takes a swipe at the left-wing Green Party leader Zack Polanski in this attack ad posted on X on November 21st, 2025, the very day, incidentally, that Reform's previous Welsh leader got sentenced for 10.5 years in jail for accepting bribes for Russia.
He wants to legalise all drugs and outlaw landlords. So in Zack Polanski's Britain, it is legal to sell crack cocaine, heroin and fentanyl, but illegal to rent your flat out. And if you object to any of his policies, he very reasonably simply calls you a fascist.
Fascism, fascist, fascist, fascism, fascism, fascism. Fascism!
In short, Zack is a lunatic, and such has been the demise of the Tories and Labour that he's currently in second place. So if you think Britain should have borders, should enforce them, and indeed deport people who are here illegally, if you want a strong British military, including a formidable deterrent, if you don't want Britain to become the world's biggest crack den, then please, don't be like Zack. Go to reformparty.uk and join us.
So a couple of things in there before we move on to the fallacy bit. So he says, very reasonably calls you a fascist. Okay,
I think he's trying to be sarcastic.
Right. And he also says...
That was the impression I got.
He also says military.
He does say... Yeah, that was weird, wasn't it?
And you think, why didn't... It's their film. They could have just shot that again. I think he was...
Yeah, absolutely.
He said
Do
something...
a second take.
Yeah, he said something that goes, really... and I think he was going to halfway through militarily and then realised there wasn't an L in there. So anyway, Adam Pugh of the Green Party in Lewisham, Galileo's in quickly on X on the same day as the Post. And he posts, I know that Zia Yusuf UK desperately lacks self-awareness, but do you think he realises that the very things he criticises Zack Polanski and the Greens for, when he's not lying his arse off, are the very reasons we're polling second, and every time he points them out, more people join us. So he's going, yeah, you can shout all you like. And actually, on the day that Dimbleby was saying what he was saying, Zack Polanski wrote in The Guardian characterising what he saw was going on. The bad news for those who attack me is that we simply won't back down. They can sound off about my teeth all they want, but the more I see them panic about the replacement of the politics of hate with the politics of hope, the more we know our movement is on the right track. So it's interesting that both the people on the right and the people on the left who are in receipt of hatred and vilification and character assassination and smear campaigns use that to justify the rightness of their position. And it's a bit like, actually, Corbyn says, no, people say that about Corbyn. He doesn't say that. He kind of does his thing, and then people say, yes, be like Corbyn. He's always been on the right side of history. Glossing over the previous success doesn't guarantee future success, but that whole of, oh yeah, well, you can tell the amount of vitriol he's on the receiving end of, he must be right.
Yeah.
Whilst that used to be said about Corbyn, Farage and his ilk and Polanski and his ilk are saying it about themselves. And other commentators don't need to do that because they're too busy smearing and vilifying and all that kind of stuff.
I think this is perhaps clearest when it is talking about factual things, like whether RFK is correct in his medical assessments or whether Rick Perry is correct in his stance on climate change.
Yeah.
And claiming that if people are attacking you, that is evidence that your facts are correct.
Right.
Whereas when it is your political stance, your opinions on what the right things to do in a particular situation are, then attacking the people who have the opposite opinion to you by saying, if they think I'm wrong,
then I must be right.
I'm happy.
Right. It shows me for more of the right that I am.
Yeah. I think either way that works, left to right or right to left.
Yeah.
I think it's justifiable to some extent to hold that opinion, to say that, if you're on the right and you believe all those things that we disagree with, but their opinions on how the world should be run or how the country should be run or whatever, if the left is attacking you for those things, then you're probably doing the right thing to be in your position if you're already on the right. And the same way for Zack. I think the Mick Hume thing, saying that if people are calling you far right, then you're probably doing the right thing. I think that implies that, and what Zia was saying about being called a fascist.
Yeah.
It implies you're not far right. You wouldn't consider yourself far right or a fascist.
Yeah.
But if people are calling you that, then because you disagree with them, that's okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas actually people who are far right and fascists get called far right and fascist all the time
because
they're far right fascists.
Yes.
So that's still fallacious. I think
right.
I think there's a mixture in there, but it is clearer when it's a factual thing.
So if it's objectively true that the people that are saying what they're saying about you is being denied by you by virtue of the fact that they can't be right because Galileo was right and he was also vilified.
Essentially, if you're disagreeing with their categorization of you, then that's different to if you're agreeing with their categorization of you and saying that it's like a badge of honor to be called negative things by the people you massively disagree with.
Yeah. That's just made me think of the badge of honor thing. When I was at school, we used to write an alternative school magazine, which was quite, not dissimilarly satirical to this show, and it also ripped the piss out of all sorts of things, and we called ourselves the Lunatic Fringe as a badge of honor because there was some things were happening around the school that were attributed to the Lunatic Fringe. So so we, not that we did any of those, we might have laid claim to one or two of them, but we're kind of like that. So we just signed ourselves the TLF Lunatic Fringe as a badge of honor. Yeah. The more lunatic we are, we'll have that. Yeah. So which pleasingly sounds a bit like KLF, who burned £1 million. Yeah, we weren't that mad. Yeah. Yeah. Sing a song of 6 wars I stopped for Nobel Peace, while fallacies distract from war in Middle East. And when the strikes are open, the markets go ka-ching. If it wasn't for the lies they tell you, I'd surely be king. Trump sitting in the White House, says it's going well. France is in the Gulf states, giving them all hell. Hundreds of wild fallacies committed every day. It's not his fault, reality just doesn't go his way. Ever feel like you've been cheated? Traditional punk arrangement there of Sing a Song of Sixpence, of course.
So, in the Fallacy in the Wild, we like to talk about the fallacies of the week from a non-political perspective, and our first example this week comes from the Newsroom, the brilliant Aaron Sorkin show. Yeah. And this is at the New Year's Eve party, and Neil is trying to get them to do a story on Bigfoot.
Did I miss anything?
Neil won't rest until he gets Will to do a story on Bigfoot.
Did Bigfoot do something?
Bigfoot can't do anything. It's not real.
That's what they said about the moon landing.
Wow, that's layer upon layer, isn't it? Wow.
So it's true that there are people who said the moon landing wasn't real.
Yeah.
But ironically, and not working for Don's point there, is that probably there's quite a big overlap between the people who said the moon landing wasn't real and the people who say Bigfoot is real.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's great. Did Bigfoot do something? No, he didn't do anything. He's not real. He said the moon landing wasn't real.
But in his attempts to get them to do a story on Bigfoot, Neil has the same kind of argument, but arguably a better one.
Pandas were thought to be a myth until 1869. Gorillas were thought to be a myth until 1902. The giant squid was thought to be a myth until 2004.
So he's pointing out there are large animals that until relatively recently people thought were a myth. And so thinking that Bigfoot is a myth doesn't mean it. In fact, those examples make it more likely that Bigfoot is real, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
Those examples aren't 100% accurate. The panda one is. At least in Western civilization, pandas genuinely were thought to be a mythical Chinese character of folklore.
Right.
Until the
Like
mid
dragons.
1800s.
Yeah.
Until a Western explorer came across a pelt and was taken to see real pandas. And they were like, whoa, these things are real?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The gorillas kind of maybe an argument because it was, again, similarly the 1850s or mid 1800s. Because this is when there was a lot of exploration going on and scientists were classifying things that they hadn't done before. But it was around the 1850s that they found the western gorilla. But the mountain gorillas, the larger species, were still, even after they found the western gorillas, people thought, that's just a made-up story, though. And it was 1902 when they first found the mountain gorilla.
Wow.
And the giant squid thing, though, is not real.
Completely made
because
up.
the giant squids have been known about for a long time, and they found beaks in the bellies of sperm whales and things like that. So they knew that giant squids existed. They just hadn't. It was the 2000s before they had footage of giant squids in the sea.
Yeah.
But they'd found dead ones,
evidence
and
of
they'd
it,
found lots of bits of them before, so they knew they existed.
Not,
they just
not just turned up in stories. Yeah.
But it's true that until people started exploring and looking for megafauna, there were stories about that people thought, that's just bullshit, that turned out not to be bullshit. But there's also lots of stories about things that are bullshit that still we consider bullshit.
Yeah. Yes. Like Bigfoot, maybe? Yeah.
Like Bigfoot, yeah.
Well, it's always surprised me that dinosaurs, the discovery of dinosaurs, doesn't seem to have been linked with, you see, I told you there'd be dragons. No,
it is. Yeah, you're not looking in the right places. There's loads of people that reckon that dragons and dinosaurs are the same thing, basically, yeah.
Right.
There's also a lot that link it to the behemoth mentioned in the Bible.
Right.
And saying it's proof that the Bible's real.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There you go.
Because dinosaurs existed.
Because dinosaurs. Okay. That's an intriguing.
Yeah.
Yes. Morbius loop of justification. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Given the fact that the Earth's only 4,000 years old.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So our second example is from Smallville. And this is an episode where Lex Luthor's dad, Lionel, has become convinced that something weird is going on with Clark.
Right.
Like, he's not just a normal kid.
Yeah.
But Lex is having none of it because he's a friend of Clark's and doesn't believe in that kind of thing.
You know, Dad, they say mental illness is hereditary. I'm willing to accept my break with reality. Are you?
Oh, Lex, men of vision have so often been mocked. Galileo knew it was the Earth that orbited the sun, and he was sentenced to death for that discovery.
Where's the Inquisition when you need it?
Yeah. Yeah, where's the Inquisition? Yeah, there you go.
And so, as is so often the case when this kind of fallacy comes up in fiction, Lionel, of course, is correct. And his invocation of Galileo he is a misunderstood genius, essentially.
Right.
So,
yes.
Just an evil
one. Just, yeah. Yeah. And speaking of Inquisition.
Yes.
Yes.
Our third example is from Monty Python's Flying Circus. This is a sketch where mountaineers are scaling the north face of the Uxbridge Road.
Yes.
So they're lying down. And the thing is, there's still pedestrians going up and down.
Yeah,
and there's still
cars
driving past.
Yeah, kind of like think Batman going up the side of the building on the TV. Yeah.
So they're just kind of lying down and using ropes. And John Cleese is interviewing the lead mountaineer.
Some people say this is crazy. Oh, well, they said Crippen was crazy, didn't they? Well, Crippen was crazy. Oh, well, there you are then.
Yeah, so he hasn't done that quite right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's just standing. So John Cleese is just standing on the street,
crouching next to the guy.
Greg Chapman's like fully prone, clambering. I was hammering a piton into the pavement. That's an even more convoluted version of Big Picture. It's not real. Well, they said that about the moon landing. Yeah, that's what. Well, there you are then, and it's just great that you try and grasp the logic of what's going on, and then it gets pulled. The logic rug gets pulled out from underneath Graham Chapman's argument. And but then he comes back again and claims that as his argument.
He's vindicated.
Yeah.
Somehow.
So we're gonna play fake news, folks. I love the game. It's a great game. I understand the game as well as anybody.
Yes, it's time for Fake News, the game where I read out 3 Trump quotes, 2 of which are real and 1 I made up, and Mark has to figure out which one is fake news.
You see, what we've got to think about, what we've got to be mindful of, are all the strikes against early Renaissance solar mechanics. Because what we need to look at is the amount of times that I've supposedly lost, because what that obviously shows is that the entire scoring system is biased and that I have therefore won.
Yeah, I mean, because you've lost more times than you've won,
is evidence.
That's evidence
to show
that you were right all along.
I was right all along.
Because otherwise, why would I be trying to attack you by knocking you down?
Quite. Absolutely. Absolutely. Clear as day. Clear as day.
Sure.
Clear as the Earth goes around the sun. Yeah.
So these examples are from a time when Trump thought of a metaphor on the spot,
right,
for government overspending, and ran with it. And it wasn't a staged advert for Sharpie, as it turns out. So, statement number 1. See this pen right here? This pen is an interesting example. It's the same thing. So this pen is very inexpensive, but it writes well. I like it. But I can't have the pen the way it was. You know what it is. I don't want to give too much publicity, but they do treat me well. Sharpie. So I came here. They have $1,000 pens. And you hand pens out. You're signing and you hand them out. You're handing them to all these people. Sometimes you have 30 or 40 people. And they were $1,000 a piece. Beautiful pen. Ballpoint. 1,000. It was gold, silver, gorgeous.
Okay.
Statement number
2. Right.
But I'm handing out to kids that don't even know what the hell. What is this, mummy? There's kids. They're getting a pen for $1,000. They have no idea what it is. And I feel guilty because I'm like, by nature, I don't, it's the government. I love the government like I love myself economically. I want to save money. So I'm saying this is crazy. And I had another problem. They didn't write well. So I take it out and I sign it and there's no ink. And I've got all you people looking and you're saying there must be something wrong with Trump. And I'm signing and there's no ink in the pen and it costs $1,000.
Okay. And his metaphor is?
We're getting there.
Right, okay.
And statement number 3.
Right.
So I like the ones that work, but they tell me I have to use the $1,000 ones that don't work. And it's the same as when I put the embassy in Jerusalem.
Right.
They wanted me to spend billions of dollars and tear down the building that was there and have a new building, but I did it for $2 million and got it done in record time like nobody could believe. And I could have done the Fed, the Federal Review Building, and the Federal Reserve Building. I could have done it so much better and it would have been finished by now and it would be the most beautiful building you've ever seen.
Okay. Right. Well, obviously they're all completely true. Hold on. Right. Okay, so I'm quite taken with possibly the conclusion that he draws that might be the made up, but also the love the government like I love myself economically. And there's a telltale by nature I don't, it's the government. Non-sequitur thing going on whilst people in his head run around going, quick, string some thoughts together. We've been away too long. I just can't believe that they're not all him. Okay, which is the one? Well, I'm going to stick my neck out and say that number 3 is the one you made up.
Right. And of the other 2, which are you more convinced by?
More convinced by the... Well, see, when you say that, I'm no longer convinced. I suspect... he says Trump in that one. So is that... Okay, number 2. I'm more convinced by number 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And number 2?
Yeah.
Is real.
But I'm handing out to kids that don't even know what is this, Mommy? It's kids. They're getting a pen for $1,000. They have no idea what it is. And I feel guilty because I'm like, I'm by nature, I don't it's the government. I love the government like I love myself economically. I want to save money. So I'm saying, this is crazy. And it had another problem. They didn't write well. So I take it out, and I sign, and there's no ink. And I got all you people looking, and you're saying, there must be something wrong with Trump. And I'm signing, and there's no ink in the pen, and it costs $1,000.
They're all laughing because there is something wrong with Trump.
Yeah, and I think he forgot what metaphor he was making at the time.
Yeah.
Like, it was supposed to be about the wasteful spending, but he's like, and also I look like a fucking idiot.
Yeah. That's because I love the government like I love myself. Well, you don't love anything as much as you love yourself. Because and then he starts talking about that. But I love he said, by nature, I don't know, it's the government. I love the government like I love myself economically.
Yeah.
Said, I want to save money. Oh, okay. Right. So that. Wow. Yeah. And he gets sidetracked by his narcissism leaps up and said, so the people are looking at me and you think there must be something wrong with me. Well, there is, then they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
notwithstanding $1,000 Sharpies.
You also think that number one is real?
Yes.
And number one is real.
See this pen right here? This pen is an interesting example. It's the same thing. So this pen is very inexpensive, but it writes well. I like it. But I can't have the pen the way it was. You know what it is. I don't want to give too much publicity, but they do treat me well, Sharpie. So I came here, they have $1,000 pens. And you hand pens out, you're signing and you're handing them out, you're handing them to all these people. Sometimes you have 30, 40 people. And they were $1,000 a piece. Beautiful pen, ballpoint. 1,000. It was gold, silver, gorgeous.
Why are they giving him those? Why don't they just let him have the big marker Sharpies?
I mean, almost certainly they weren't.
Right.
I seriously doubt there was anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, because when he signs a bill, particularly, they tend to give out pens to the people who have worked on the bill as a commemorative thing.
Yeah.
I don't know when he's giving them to kids. That's insane. But I doubt they're $1,000 pens that they're handing out to the various Congress people.
No.
There's no need for that at all.
No. But it's just basically a Sharpie, one of those Sharpies.
Well, no, now it's
sprayed
Sharpies. That's what he's saying.
Sprayed it silver.
Is that the ballpoint ones that they wanted him to use, which are shit, and $1,000 each, aren't as good as Sharpies. That's his point. He's saying the Sharpies are like $5 and much better. Yeah. And I, as you can now tell, made up the third one.
Right.
Well past that amount of extra words, he was still talking about pens. I had to take it in a new direction because he went on and on for a couple of minutes about the pens and about he totally went off the rails of was the metaphor he was making was about wasteful government spending, but he started talking about how he phoned up the guy at Sharpie who was like, what's going on, and he was like, I can't be signing bills for billions of dollars with a grey Sharpie pen. And he was like, well, I can make you a nicer looking Sharpie. And it's like, oh, what could you do? Paint it black. I could put your signature on it. He was like, what? There was this whole long explanation of how the guy at Sharpie made his Sharpies look cooler. Nothing to do with what he's supposed to be talking about, but
because it just veers off into narcissist land.
Absolutely.
Wow. There was somebody saying, I saw it popped up in the feed. Oh, he was trying to rope in some woman who was there for a different thing entirely, and he was trying to rope them into
thing.
Yes. Yeah. And he was roping them into thoughts about women competing in men's sports or the other way around. And she said, I've got no opinion on that. And then psychologist somebody said, I'm no professional psychologist, but I'm quite interested in this stuff, said we've got to look out for narcissist crash. So the moment that the emperor's new clothes are pointed out to be nothing at all is the moment when narcissists get really dangerous because they start to overcompensate. Maybe declare war in the Middle East, that kind of thing, when people start to say, actually, you're talking rubbish.
I don't think we can blame Sharon, the DoorDash grandma,
for
war in the Middle East. I think that's going a bit far, personally.
I think she's personally, but I think she's like triggered the narcissistic crash, and he's overcompensated by desperately trying to get into favour with other people who, prior to that, he thought really liked him for what he is. Well, they do like him for what he is, which is an idiot, and will do things for them.
Yeah.
BB and Fledge. Yeah.
Well, we do have some social contestants on Discord. Yeah. Andrew says, I'm guessing 2 because he mentions feeling guilty, and that doesn't sound like him.
That's cool, yeah. No. Did spot that. Yes, I think I might well have gone along with that. Yeah.
On Patreon, Richard Thunder Hopkins says, I feel like I'm cheating, not only because my wife keeps checking my phone, but also because I'm still obsessed with the Fanta-fascists, so I know that 3 is fake news. Obviously, all 3 are fake news because they were, I believe, $200 to $300 pens, which is ridiculous in itself, but not a grand, Mr. Trump.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
Renee Z says, I remember him ranting about Sharpies and a $1,000 pen. I'm certain 1 is real. 2 follows beautifully, but is it real? I think it's real. But 3 could also be real. And I could have done the Fed, the Federal Review Building, and the Federal Reserve Building. Such a slick Trumpian cover-up of the use of the wrong word. Is it Jim or is it real? I think it's Jim. Therefore, 3 is fake news.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you see, that's the roller coaster you put us on every time. Yes.
Our newest patron, Chris, says, G'day, gents. First crack at this. I can't remember how many $1,000 pens I've bought my kids over the years, so that all makes sense, obviously. But I struggle to believe the Muppet would say he loved anything other than himself, so I reckon 2 is fake.
Good. Yes. That did give me pause for thought.
And finally, Hugh says, would Jim have brought Jerusalem into it? I thought number 1 and number 2 were both true. I think I remembered them, but then there's number 3. I don't think Jim would mention Jerusalem just to win a silly game. Surely that must be genuine Trump waffle. I'm going to say that 1 is made up. Why doesn't this game get any easier?
Yes. That's true. Hadn't occurred to me that it we go through this pain because it doesn't get any easier. Yeah.
Turns out I absolutely bring up Jerusalem to
win a silly game.
Yeah, I've got no respect for Jerusalem.
No, not when winning is at stake.
No.
Yeah.
Important things.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there we go. Yes. So that's not to say that if I start winning, that doesn't mean that therefore I've lost. Just we're not stacking up in the Galilei kind of way.
Will you do the Fandango?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thunderbolt and lightning.
So it's time for the part of the show that this week at least is called Teleportation is Not a Logical Fallacy, because
when I read this, and I did read it in the week, I go, what the absolute, the kind of, we live in a world where what the fuck is more often on our lips than hitherto it had been.
Yes.
It was one of those things where you would not look forward to, but there would be an acknowledgement that it was quite a surprise. A surprising thing happened, sufficient for you to say what the fuck, and that's now basically the background noise.
I think this surprised a lot of people more than it surprised me.
Right.
Because it involves Gregg Phillips, the current head of FEMA's Office of Response and Recovery.
Yeah.
And I've spent quite a lot of time paying attention to Gregg Phillips because he also is one of the architects of the 2000 Mules thing.
Yes.
And so I looked into his background for that.
He spent a lot of time in didn't he work for government a lot of time or something?
He didn't. Well, he didn't. No, he claimed that he did, but he ended up total over the past kind of 40 years, he spent about 2 years or something working in various local governments. And basically every time he ended under a cloud, basically resigned with people accusing him of either stealing, embezzling, or handing huge contracts to his mates.
Taking things out of the stationery cupboard.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's bad at what he does at the best of times. he, as we've saw extensively, is very bad at explaining himself in any way.
Yeah.
Explaining his thoughts on things or any evidence he has for anything.
Yeah. In language that other people might understand.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, when it turns out that he also thinks that he teleported a couple of times, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Sounds like the kind of bullshit he'd come out with.
Yeah.
But it turns out that some people didn't know that he was that kind of idiot. So, in January, actually, of this year, he was on a podcast with his co-conspirator, Catherine Engelbrecht.
Yeah.
He told her, in very boring and badly explained terms, about a time that he had told his kids that he was going to Waffle House and went to Waffle House. But it's a better story than that.
Right. There was no intervening travel.
The Waffle House he ended up at was 50 miles away from where he started, and he's got no idea how he got there, and it was apparently, according to his story, moments between having the conversation with his kids and being in a Waffle House in Rome, Georgia.
Right. Yeah.
So teleportation is the only explanation, obviously, because alcoholism isn't.
Yes, exactly. Not DUI or anything like that.
No.
Yeah.
So the having a blackout, having a lapse in memory.
Yeah.
His explanation for that is teleporting.
Right.
It's not the only time this has happened to him.
Oh, okay. He's blacked out. I think
while driving.
I think the DMV need to have a chat with him.
Yeah. I don't know why this isn't the very, very obvious thing that everyone should understand about these stories.
Yeah.
Because, he claimed that when he was driving at one point, his vehicle was lifted up and carried roughly 40 miles from Albany, Georgia, before setting down in a ditch, which is exactly the kind of thing that happens if you are drinking and black out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Or just use the elevated bit of the freeway.
Sure.
You're going to get lifted up off the, you're looking down and go, oh man, how on earth am I up here? Yeah, well, you just went up an on-ramp, and then you kind of got a bit worried and didn't take the off-ramp and ended up in a ditch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's also, another time, completely separate incident, claimed that he, in the desert somewhere, because that's how we know it's a separate incident, because the Albany, Georgia isn't near a desert.
Right.
He said a deceased girlfriend, like a girlfriend of his who had died. He says, the girl that I dated came into the car with me, the girl that had died. She said, you're not going to survive this because there was a truck coming towards him, an oncoming truck. Yeah. And he said, so I'm going to take you away. And she lifted me and the car up out of the way from a truck that had slid across the road and had come all the way across the road and was about to hit me. So multiple times he has apparently been lifted up in his car, or just disappeared from one place and reappeared in another place tens of miles away. I think someone who thinks this is true shouldn't be in charge of
any kind
something
of
important.
Or even just a car weighing a ton.
Well, that too, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. But something like being the third most important person in FEMA. That I think's bad.
Yeah.
The weirdest fucking thing about this... Well, no, hang on. That's going too far. One of the weird things about this is the fact that he's considered by people who know what's going on at FEMA to be one of the better people there.
No.
What does this tell you about what
what the rest of them must be like?
The whole administration and major offices, because basically he's like, they've had a couple of disasters since he was appointed head of the Office of Response and Recovery, and he's done all right. He's like done better than anyone expected he was going to do. He hasn't entirely fucked it up, which is for current Trump administration officials.
It is outstanding. Yes. 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 It's outstanding in his field. Yeah.
So,
wow. I'm surprised he didn't, kind of call in to create a bit like Space Force. Didn't create a teleportation department, because you could respond a lot quicker.
Well, the problem is it's completely uncontrollable. He can't make it happen.
Right.
Because that has, believe me, has come up in the questioning.
Right.
Yeah, it's something that he doesn't have any control over. It's just, just sometimes happens. I mean,
right.
It strikes me as a lie that someone would come up with if they knew that a story was going to come out that they'd been found somewhere they weren't supposed to be.
Yes. Yeah.
That feels like what it could be leading up to.
It feels a bit like if only the prince formerly known as Andrew, or the Andrew formerly known as Prince. If only he thought of that rather than just say, "Oh yeah, pizza house in Woking." Where, well, I got and I suddenly found myself on an island with an underage trafficked waitress. Yeah, and I've no explanation as to how I got there. And people would have just gone, yeah, that sounds like, mental illness is genetic. Yeah.
So, one official at FEMA said it is hard to trust the judgment of someone who said they teleported and then doubled down on it, but he seems to really care about people, which I really appreciate, and I think he cares about readiness for hurricane season.
Right. Well, that's the conclusion they draw. You can't draw that conclusion from the...
I mean, yes, he's clearly insane, but...
but he's quite nice. Yeah.
But it would be worse if we had another Trump lackey in charge. So... Yeah.
And the disappointing thing is that Gregg Phillips must be feeling disappointed about is that when asked about this, Trump said, "No, I don't know him." So
he did say that.
Yeah, despite the fact that he worked very hard on. Nearly forgot his name. Then,
Dinesh D'Souza.
Damn.
Oh,
on Dinesh D'Souza's film. Yeah, and Dinesh D'Souza tried very hard to be visible to Trump, sufficient to be pardoned.
Oh yeah, no, Philip. He absolutely knows Phillips. There's no question about it. That's why he's fucking at FEMA, isn't it? That's the only reason he's there.
Mm-hmm.
But when asked about it, Trump asked if he was kidding.
Right. Yeah.
And then he said, "Oh, I don't know about teleportation." Because
he's never watched any television.
That's the key.
Yeah,
teleport. Now, how much Trump knows about teleportation was really the crux of where reporters were hoping to get to in asking him about whether he thinks that an official who believes this shit should be in charge of things. And he was like, "Well, I don't know.
I don't know about that.
I'm not an expert in that area."
It's his usual thing, isn't it? I don't know. I've never heard of him. I'm just learning about this now. I don't know about teleportation. Yeah, like insert noun here, or verb here, or person here, and the sentence will still be, "I'm only just learning about it. I don't know. There's nothing you can tell me about that. I'm an expert." So it's along that continuum. He will deny, confirm, talk about himself. Yeah.
He said, "I don't know anything about teleporting. It just sounds a little strange, but I know nothing about teleporting or him, but I'll find out about it right now."
Wow. He's going to find out about He's what? He's going to find out about teleporting rather than look into the fact that one of the guys who's leading an agency is convinced that he didn't travel to Waffle House dead drunk one night.
Yeah.
But was teleported. He's not. Here's me imagining Obama saying, "Can you imagine if I'd said that?" Yeah.
So I want to be clear because Gregg Phillips, when questioned about this, pointed out that because teleportation holds certain kind of sci-fi connotations. He says the word teleportation was not mine. He said he wrote on social media,
driving under the influence or blacking out, and I shouldn't be in charge of a license.
Yeah. He said the word teleportation was not mine. It was used by someone else in the conversation. There was only one other person in the conversation. Reaching for language to describe something with no easy name. That's not true. Here's what he said. Teleporting is no fun, he said.
And he said that before somebody reported on that?
Yeah, he said this in January. In the original conversation is when he said teleportation and teleporting.
Okay, yeah. I was taken out of context. Yeah.
He's also, again, the times I've mentioned, not the only times it's happened.
Yeah.
He's talked multiple times about a time when he vanished from a Lowe's Hardware in Indianapolis for 2 hours and then reappeared in his car in a McDonald's parking lot across the street.
With a whole bunch of stuff that he hadn't paid for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says, at some point, I'd gone through the drive-thru apparently, gotten a Coke and Big Mac, and then parked and fell asleep for 2 hours. Yeah, that's...
Right.
And then forgot that he'd done that. That's the explanation.
Yeah.
That's not mysterious.
Yeah. So he didn't walk out of Lowe's.
Worrying.
Yeah, he didn't walk out of Lowe's with a whole bunch of stuff he didn't pay for and then tried to explain it by going, oh, yeah, I blacked out. What, you blacked out just before the checkout when it came to pay, yeah. And then you woke up again in the car park with all the stuff and no less money than when you started.
Yeah.
So his only explanation is that he was somehow teleported. Like, we've all lost hours like that, and it's been due to a surfeit of alcohol.
That does tend to be the thing that it's due to, yeah.
Yeah, because it just wiped you out. Yes, there are whole days I've probably over my lifetime, I'm owed a week. I've been transported for a week. Oh, and didn't he say, actually, not teleportation, it's a more biblical term?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's how you would get away with that. But let's usher in the notion that he might be somehow ethereal and, associated with the Bible.
Yeah, he says basically this happens all the time to people of faith.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not a new idea at all.
Right.
It's just something. If
people explain it away by saying, "Oh yeah, I was transported to that. I was lifted up. I ascended. I was yeah. He didn't say it around Easter, did he? Yeah, yeah. Wow. So you kind of think, yes, having been on the receiving end of a driver who has been mid-teleportation, crashed into me and wrote off my car because they passed out at the wheel.
Yeah.
Turns out they did that quite often. Consequently, they weren't licensed to drive or insured to drive the car that they were driving because they would suffer these blackout incidents. You kind of think, yeah, the last person I would want to put in charge of a response and rescue department dealing with global national disasters is the woman that crashed into my car.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they were mid-teleportation.
And of course, if you want to hear more about Gregg Phillips,
yeah,
then my audiobook, 2000 Mules and One Big Lie, is out now. And anyone who's a patron by the end of May will get a free copy if they would like one. So
fantastic. There you go. That was a nice plug. Well done. Yeah. Before finally some things we really don't have time to talk about.
The Pope controversially came out in favour of peace rather than war in his Easter message, and Trump took that personally. Perhaps he was already drafting his Truth Social post where he told the Iranians to open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. You know, the one which ended, praise be to Allah, not the one where he threatened to wipe out their entire civilization. That was a couple of days later. Anyway, after seeing a 60 Minutes segment where 3 cardinals agreed with the Pope that peace is cool and war is a bit of a dick move, Trump accused Bobby from Chicago of being weak on crime. Now, we talk a lot of shit about Trump on this show, but it's only fair to give him credit when he's right. One of my favourite statistical quirks is the fact that the Vatican technically has the world's highest per capita crime rate. Admittedly, that's because there's only about 500 permanent residents and most of the crimes are pickpockets preying on the roughly 7 million tourists who visit every year, but surely the Pope can spare some of the colourfully dressed halberd-wielding Swiss guards to crack down on the rampant theft right outside his house. I imagine this situation must be tricky for J.D. Vance, who converted to Catholicism in 2019. Who should he side with, his dementia-riddled boss or the infallible head of his religion, who is guided by the Holy Spirit and considered the earthly representative of Christ himself? Just kidding, of course, he chose Trump. In fact, he tried to Vance-splain the just war doctrine to the Supreme Pontiff, an idea developed primarily by St. Augustine. You might think that the fact that Pope Leo is literally the first pope from the Augustinian order, and he wrote his doctoral thesis on Augustine's philosophy, puts him at an advantage in this argument, but you're forgetting the fact that JD's already killed one pope, and now he has a taste for it. Trump, meanwhile, conscious that there are still Catholics he hasn't pissed off, posted a completely fucking unhinged AI image of him as American Jesus, which he deleted hours later after a backlash from his own supporters, who are fine with all the crimes and suspected kid fucking, but draw the line at blasphemous AI slop. Trump claimed he thought it was a picture of him as a doctor working with the Red Cross, but there are some telltale signs in the image that this isn't true. First, there are no red crosses anywhere, unless they're hidden behind the fighter jets and bald eagles. But also, he's dressed in Jesus' classic white and red robes, he's laying on hands, and he's literally glowing.
Perhaps in a bid to increase his credibility as an advocate for the environment and the healthy part we all play as organisms in the global scheme of things, you know, the way David Attenborough advocates, or perhaps to present himself as the ideal candidate for the next series of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here as a perfect jungle dweller, RFK Jr. revealed in a new book, RFK Jr, The Fall and Rise, old Robbo is quoted as having written in his journal of 11th November 2001, whilst America was reeling from events a month prior, I was standing in front of my parked car on I-684 cutting the penis out of a road-killed raccoon, thinking about how weird some of my family members have turned out to be. Adding, my kids waited patiently in the car. Being the king of exploits involving roads and bears and bicycles, it doesn't really come as a surprise. What does come as a surprise is his failure to follow a career in surgery or veterinary reproductive qualifications, let alone the continuing surprise that he's in charge of the whole of the health service for the United States. Apparently, he took the raccoon's genitals so that he could study them later. 'Cause, yeah, that explains it. I suspect that Peter Greenaway probably based his film Drowning by Numbers on Kennedy, given that elsewhere in the book he talks about his fascination with the corpses of dead seagulls. I'd like to pick up some of those dead seagulls for my skull collection. Oh my God, he has a collection! What with that, and he once severed the head of a washed-up deceased whale with a chainsaw, one wonders that Guillermo del Toro didn't sign him up as an interior designer. Still, could be worse. He could be a driving instructor in Chappaquiddick, or, say, given the post of Secretary of Health and Human Services, despite being a leading vaccine critic and croaky idiot. Oh, no, wait.
Georgia's 14th congressional district clearly has a type, and that type is apparently people who view basic reality as a personal insult. After Marjorie Taylor Greene vacated her seat, the voters decided the best replacement would be Clay Fuller, who beat Democrat Sean Harris by 11 points in a district Trump won by 37% just 18 months ago. Fuller celebrated the incoming US 250th anniversary by proving he hasn't read a history book, a map or a sports page in his entire life. Fuller's descent into madness began, as all great American tragedies do, with a hotel air conditioner in Maryland. After waking up in a mild sweat, Fuller took to Twitter to post a rant that managed to be wrong about more things in a minute and a half than most people are in a full session of Congress.
So I had to stay in a hotel in Maryland for work, and I wake up and it is blazing hot in my room, so the AC's out. So I go to the front desk and I was like, hey, sir, the AC's out. Can you send anybody down to my room to help fix it? I said, well, it's not that it's broken. You know, I have to understand that there's an AOC Green New Deal thing where if you're not moving in your room, the AC just basically shuts off on its own. I said, well, I'm asleep. Obviously, I'm not moving. And he said, well, don't worry. There's this VIP setting that we can override it and the AC will turn on. And I was offended. And I said, hey, I don't understand. I should already be in VIP mode because I'm from Georgia. He says, I don't understand. I said, well, Georgia is named after George Washington, who quite literally invented freedom. It's the birthplace of Ronald Acuna Jr. It's the birthplace of Gunnar Stockton. And he said, well, I'm immediately switching it to VIP mode. So I'm just want to say to the state of Maryland, I know that y'all are newer to the union and that you don't have a football team. And if Gunnar Stockton was born here, he'd play some fake sport like lacrosse. But AC has quite literally saved billions of lives. Socialism has killed billions of lives. So as we celebrate our 250th anniversary, let's not be like Europe, Maryland. Let's double down on freedom. Let's double down on liberty. And let's double down on being awesome.
Okay, wow. Here we go.
Yep.
The Green New Deal was never enacted, so if the hotel has a policy, it's not based on that. Georgia is named after King George II, not George Washington, who didn't invent freedom. Ronald Acuna Jr. was born in Venezuela. Maryland isn't newer to the Union, it's one of the original 13 colonies. Maryland does have a football team. Air conditioning has not saved billions of lives, although it has prevented a lot of heat-related deaths worldwide. The data I can find puts it in the range of about 2.5 million. Finally, socialism, which has nothing to do with air conditioning, hasn't killed billions, even if you lump it in with communism, and the death toll from capitalism is far higher. Fuller's new to politics, but already seems to have figured out the MAGA game plan. Take a minor personal inconvenience, blame it on a high-profile woman of colour, fabricate 5 centuries of history to feel superior, and then demand that everyone double down on being awesome.
So good, isn't it? So wrong. Fantastic. When you're a kid and innocent of all things corrupt and awful, the next best thing to meeting an actual astronaut must surely be going to where the actual president of the actual United States of America actually lives and search for Easter eggs and roll them about and meet the Easter Bunny and hang out in the garden, ignoring the building site over there, obviously, and then some bumbling old geezer in a tie that's too long and leaning forward too much like the front half of a pantomime minotaur in his lifted shoes and waving God knows where with hands that are smaller than the 3-year-old sitting next to you on the table comes over, and your dreams are shattered because you realise that this must be the president because he's not talking about bunnies and chocolate or even Jesus and Psalm Sunday, but starts banging on about Joe Biden using the auto pen. Banging on at length into the faces of bemused children, for Christ's sakes. Yeah, way to read the room, Donny. In the middle of a war you chose to start, you're still talking about the previous administration in terms designed to prevent people, even fucking children apparently, drawing negative comparisons with your dumpster shit fire show creak of what barely passes for governance. Satisfied that he'd indoctrinated the next generation enough after he left the kids' table, Trump fielded questions from reporters where he threatened to commit war crimes in Iran, whilst the Easter Bunny awkwardly stood nearby. Yeah, happy Easter. Someone died for these sins, don't you know?
I couldn't pay attention to most of that because I was trying to figure out, it's the Minotaur. The Minotaur, I don't think the Minotaur has a back. I think it's just like human legs in a bull top half, isn't it?
That's true, yeah.
I don't think it's like a...
Yeah.
I think you mean centaur, but still.
Oh, that's true.
It's fine.
It's fine. Yeah.
According to a bombshell article in The Atlantic last week, FBI Director Kash Patel couldn't believe his eyes when he tried to log into an internal computer system and was locked out. Instead of doing the usual things of calling IT or checking if he'd left caps lock on, he freaked out, assuming he'd been fired by the White House, and this is how they were letting him know. He called aides and allies to announce his termination, and officials and members of Congress started calling the White House demanding to know who was now in charge of the FBI. The answer, for now at least, was still Kash, as the official story is that it was a simple technical error. But based on the rest of the article, I wouldn't be shocked to find he'd had a bit of a memory lapse regarding his password, since multiple officials told The Atlantic's Sarah Fitzpatrick that Kash is known to regularly drink to excess in clubs in DC and Las Vegas. And on multiple occasions in the past year, members of his security detail had difficulty waking Patel because he was seemingly intoxicated, and a request for breaching equipment, normally used by SWAT and hostage rescue teams to quickly gain entry into buildings, was made last year because Patel had been unreachable behind locked doors. In response, Kash has filed a defamation lawsuit against the magazine for an eye-popping $250 million, claiming actual malice. But The Atlantic stands by their story based on the 24 witnesses Fitzpatrick spoke to, and the fact that Bureau, the DOJ and the White House all failed to provide any answers to the 19 detailed questions they were sent prior to publication. Kash has spent his tenure trying to purge the FBI of deep state leakers by forcing agents to take polygraph tests, yet more than 20 people still felt his behaviour was such a national security vulnerability that they risked everything to talk. If this case goes to trial, the discovery phase is going to be a bloodbath. Patel will have to prove that the magazine knew the stories were false, while the magazine gets to call those 24 witnesses to the stand to talk about the time they had to use a battering ram to get the FBI director to a morning briefing.
That's because he was in mid-teleportation. All those times. Yeah. Wow. Customs and Border Protection on Monday launched its tariff refund portal to allow importers to get money back after the Supreme Court struck down the global tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. This must be causing Trump's tics to Tourette something awful. His adoration of money is purely one-directional towards him. No wonder then perhaps that when logging into the online portal to reclaim all the expenditure Trump forced businesses to absorb as a result of illegal tariffs, they are presented with error messages. The system is currently experiencing high volume. Please try again, the messages state. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Of course there's a high volume. The US government now owes tens of thousands of reporters a total of up to $175 billion in refunds for the tariffs imposed by Trump last year under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Rick Waldenberg, CEO of educational toy maker Learning Resources, whose suit filed in 2025 led to the Supreme Court striking down the Trump administration's emergency tariffs in February, noted, "It seems like the system is overwhelmed." Whilst Beth Bernanke, co-founder of Busy Baby and Minnesota-based maker of baby products, added, "I can't even get to the point where I'd receive an error message because the portal is down. I suspect the system is running on the equivalent computing power of that which got the astronauts to the moon. No, Apollo 8. A shame the kids from Doge aren't still around. They'll be able to hack him for sure."
If you've ever found yourself thinking what the American public health discourse really needs is a soundtrack that sounds like a skeleton having a seizure in a filing cabinet, then you're in luck. Shit-swimming roadkill enthusiast Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is launching a new podcast. Titled the Secretary Kennedy Podcast, it promises a new era of radical transparency, which is government speak for "I'm going to use taxpayer-funded microphones to tell you why your tap water is turning you into a lizard." The teaser video for this auditory hellscape features Kennedy in a slick HHS-branded studio explaining that the goal of this vanity project is to bypass the corruption and lies of the scientific establishment. In other words, Bobby is tired of being fact-checked by people who actually went to medical school, so he's building his own echo chamber where he can chat with like-minded deep thinkers like celebrity chef Robert Irvine. Because when I want to know about the efficacy of the MMR vaccine, I naturally turn to the guy who lied about working on Charles and Diana's wedding cake and now spends his time screaming at failing chefs about their walk-in freezers. Critics are already calling it a state-sponsored pipeline for dangerous misinformation, which is kind of a given for anything that involves RFK. At one point, while sounding like half a dozen tin cans being dragged behind a wedding car, he promises to name the names of the forces that obstruct the paths to public health. And on that point, at least, we agree, because his name is right there in the title.
There you go.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Today, in British Parliament, Prime Minister Keir Starmer faced questions in the House about why friend of Epstein and serial underpants wearer in photos, Peter Mandelson, was appointed UK ambassador to the United States. Starmer has gone from saying, "I didn't know Mandelson was a friend of convicted child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein when he was appointed," to "Oops, sorry, yes, I did," to "I was never told that he had failed the security vetting process when it came to light that he did, but that Mandelson had been rubber-stamped as good to go by the Foreign Office anyway." Starmer argued today that he only got to hear the final result, that Mandelson had been okayed, and didn't get to see any of the workings out in the margin, and that was the fault of Sir Ollie Robbins, the former top civil servant at the Foreign Office at the time, who was effectively sacked last week. Possibly deflecting accusations of underbus throwing, and the buck stops over there then, does it, Keir? Starmer said he should have been shown the vetting working out, and that there needs to be a serious review of security procedures because it had been deliberately kept from him. Ex-Labour Party member Diane Abbott, whip withdrawn because she's a bit of a lefty and asked too many questions, inquired quite reasonably, given that Mandelson had a bit of a track record with doing dodgy things sufficient that he resigned twice from Tony Blair's administration, if it's not enough that stuff wasn't shown to you, Keir, mate, shouldn't you have just bleeding asked for it? Calls were made from all the other parties for Starmer's resignation and for a general election to be called. Notwithstanding my reservations with this Labour government, I'd like that not to happen because I don't want Farage to move into number 10. But these are the kinds of aberrant behaviours that we used to associate with the Tories, slicing ever thinner wafers of truth in order to wriggle free of blame. CF Boris and his Partygate COVID booze-ups. Indeed, Starmer echoed Boris's maintaining that he didn't deliberately mislead Parliament when he said all due processes were followed. And it's rather a crushing disappointment that the wave of optimism that swept Labour into a landslide victory after Boris is being squandered and sullied in so blatant a manner. More fool me for thinking that for once politics might be clean and honest and enacted for the people, rather than in the protection of the vested interests of millionaire chums of billionaires with questionable CVs. Keep at it, Mr. Polanski. No, not you, Roman. All the negative press following your similar expressions of hope from the Green Party must mean you're doing something right.
So that's all the bad arguments and faulty reasoning we have time for this week. You'll find the show notes at fallacioustrump.com, and if you hear Trump say something stupid and want to ask if it's a fallacy, our contact details are on the contact page.
If you think we've used a fallacy ourselves, let us know, and if you've had a good time, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, or simply tell one other person in person about how much they like our podcast. And you can support the show at patreon.com/ftrump, just like our newest patron, Chris Ward. Our strawman level patrons, Adam, Mike Smith, Chuck Gray, Scott, LT, Richard Thunder Hopkins, Mark Reicke and Albert R. Buchanan, who told us when we met her at QED we could just call her Amber, and at QED in 24 I met the listener who recognised at QED the year before because we keep using her full name all the time, and last year we escaped from a creepy children's home in record time whilst contemplating the interconnected small things. And our true Scotsman level patrons, Renee Z, Janet Uetta, and our top patron, Kaz Tui. Welcome aboard, Chris, and thank you everybody else for your continued support. It's very much appreciated.
You can connect with those awesome people as well as us and other listeners in the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/FallaciousTrump or in the Discord at fallaciostrump.com/Discord.
All music is by The Outbursts and was used with permission. So until next time on Fallacious Trump, we'll leave the last word to the Donald.
That's right. Go home to mommy. Bye. Bye.